Hello everyone, welcome back. If I sound slightly different, then that's because I'm ill, so I've got that deep, groggy voice at the moment. We're about halfway through January at the time of making this, and it's been a slow start to the year because quite a lot of stuff has been happening, and I owe my patrons and you guys a bit of an update. So, near the end of last year, I started a bunch of new series to do with inspirations. We were hunting for inspiration in video games. I want to carry on doing that and extend that to other things as well, like movies and animated shows, and also some things in real life. Now, because this was so interesting to me, like finally doing this inspiration series, I've gone back and I've gathered up a bunch of these screenshots I took from playing video games in the past, and I've now preemptively uploaded those to the Patreon so people have access to some of my old screenshots. So, like I said, I was doing this inspiration gathering whenever I'd play games anyway, but also to make it a bit more professional, inside of each of these PureRef reference files, I've given each screenshot or capture a number and also a couple of colored circles, so one white circle and one green one. And for me, this means that if the white one is ticked off, then it means I've spoken about it on video, I've done an analysis of it, and if the green one's ticked off, it means that I've tried to recreate something from it, either in Blender or any other 3D software. So this is a new system I'm doing for my references, and like I said, I've made these files available to my patrons. So if you're a paid patron and you go to curtisholt.online/members, there's a page there hunting for inspiration, and that will have the links. Looking back through all of those references I collected over the years, there's still a lot missing, because that's the problem when you take so many screenshots from video games, and they're all kept on like different hard drives. Maybe you never think they're important enough to keep hold of for the future, but now I'm making sure to back these things up to a dedicated hard drive, because they are useful. And I'm also rediscovering the value of books, like book-based references for artwork from video games, or historical/just general non-fictional references for anything. Because now if you look through Pinterest, which has often been a really good website for references despite some resolution issues, now it's becoming really muddied with AI-generated stuff. Obviously AI-generated content is a discussion for someone else, but it makes it a little bit annoying when you're looking for real things, like real references. So because I want to do more explorations of art styles and reference breakdowns in the future, I've collected up all of my books that would be useful for extracting references from, and now I've got a bookcase in one corner of the studio where I can access those things. So there's a bunch of video game art books there, and I've also got my collection of 3D artist magazines and 3D world magazines. These were old magazine series which I think have shut down now, but there's a whole bunch of interviews and useful things in there from other artists, and then there's nature-based ones in there as well, including astronomy and a cool one on microbial life. So I figure when it comes to doing things in Blender, if I do more of those challenges where I set myself a time limit, just try and have fun recreating something, that's a really cool source of ideas right there. We can sit down, talk about the styles of things, and just have a chill time with it. Again, I'm always trying to collect more art books. I just like having a collection of them. I pre-ordered The Art of Arcane a while ago on Amazon, but it hasn't turned up. Actually, a lot of people are having that problem. I don't think Amazon actually knew how much stock they would have, so hopefully I'll be able to get a copy of one of those in the future. Now, on the matter of inspiration, one thing I've been thinking about for quite a while actually is that for me, working in 3D is a very spatial exercise, or rather, I tend to think in a very spatial way, which is why Afterglow was such an interesting project, because I kind of just built scenes, like spatial environments to work in, before doing or alongside doing the experimental light stuff. Something about having an actual space to work in makes it more interesting, more grounded. You can imagine you're there moving a camera around in 3D space. It has a very different feel to it than just working from an empty Blender scene, just deleting the default cube and trying to make something cool with geometry nodes. I find that my brain tends to tick along and stay more engaged when there's like a diegetic reason for what you're doing to exist. So for example, rather than just working on an effect in empty space, maybe having a basic lab environment and then building an effect inside of the lab, if that makes sense. Obviously, that kind of method of making things in Blender has some trade-offs, because if you have a nice looking environment to keep yourself inspired with, that's going to slow down your scene. And also, it takes a while to make something like that, depending on the complexity. So maybe it's not a method for everyone. But in my downtime, I've started working on a few things like this. At the beginning of 2024, I had an idea for something I'll just call the compound, which is a collection of various buildings and open spaces with a lore reason to them. But it's like a mental plan and structure of, well, a facility where spaces of different exotic things can exist, right? So if I'm going to be making something like a visual effect, I think, okay, well, that'll be more appropriate in the underground section of this compound, in this section, if that makes sense, without saying too many details. So it's just something I'm kind of cognitively experimenting with. Like if I want to do aerospace things, there are hangars on the compound, right? So you think, okay, let's play around in the hangar spaces when we do things like that. So I kind of, I started blocking things out just for fun. I don't know if I'll carry on with that. I don't know if I'll show more of that in the future, but you know me, I like to discuss the psychology of creativity. So trying little things like this, just to like trick yourself into being engaged in a different way, is something I'd like to play with more. And maybe there's something quite personal about having an actual physical 3D space that you have a story for, that evolves as you do experiments. Might be an interesting thing to show on social media. Like think about that. Of your favorite artists, some of the most recognizable ones have a cohesive like universe of a story behind their work, the fictional universe. But it'd be interesting to watch like one or a few spaces evolve over time as the work progresses, like a village or a town or a city or something like that. So it's just something I'm thinking about alongside these other series I've been starting. Also, between this video and the last video, so over the New Year period, I've been doing some 3D print work for someone. And by someone, I mean my parents. Obviously, we only recently moved into this house, did a lot of renovation work, and there are some unique elements to it. Relevant to this is that one of the upstairs showers has quite a large volume of water that comes out of it, and they were having a problem with one of the traps. So a trap is often used to prevent smells coming up from the drain because it keeps a kind of water barrier inside of the container while still allowing water to flow out. Unfortunately, the one that they had wasn't working, so they handed it to me, and I've been using Blender as a CAD tool. Now, to start with, and this worked perfectly fine, I was literally just sitting here with a ruler, kind of prodding around, taking notes of the original piece to reverse engineer it, and I found that was absolutely accurate enough just to recreate the piece perfectly. I do have more advanced measuring tools in here, but it wasn't even needed. Then Blender, I can get like millimeter, like 1 or 2 millimeter precision alongside the Prusa XL. So then I would just sit there and they would tell me things that they wanted to change, like extending the length of the bowl or extending the space like between the trap or adding bevels or whatever. This is actually an earlier version. There's a second version that's being used at the moment. And then I gave them the option for the type of filament that they wanted. And we went for a kind of stainless steel silvery one, just because it kind of matched the motif, because we got a lot of stainless steel in the house. And I got paid for that as well. So this is my first time doing like an actual paid for 3D print project. Now that's probably not something I'll do much of in the future, but it's been interesting transferring those skills. Hi, it's Editing Curtis here. When I recorded this video, I did have one more segment that was supposed to be here at the end, talking specifically about why there's been a really slow start to the year. If you've been around for a while, you know I have a bunch of medical conditions and I bump into really obscure things that kind of fall a bit outside of the medical literature. One of my problems that occurred about 5 years ago, a subjective breathing issue, has now returned. So it reappeared on the 21st of December, and it came back, I feel like, stronger than it ever has. It was originally due to a reaction to milk protein. This time it seems more complicated. So complicated, in fact, I've had to build a new data analysis system to compare how the severity of the symptoms change over 24 and 48 hour periods whenever I ingest or take anything or perform any kind of activity. I'm also seeing doctors as well, but you know me, whenever things like this happen, it basically becomes a full-time job of studying, analyzing, and trying to solve. It's the greatest bane of my existence that the problems I bump into are things that no doctor has ever heard of. I have to put in like the extra work and do the legwork to figure things out myself. And I've tried to do this as fast as I can, but this one is complicated. But my main goal is to improve it so I can get back to work and hopefully not let it interrupt things too much. So bear with me. If you made it this far, leave some kind of art related emoji to let me know, and hopefully I'll be back soon. See ya.